Hello and welcome to Relationship Helpers with Vincent and Laura Ketchie, where we help you make your relationships better. We are licensed professional counselors at Christian Counselors of Mooresville with a heart for healing families. On our program, we discuss the hard-hitting issues that families are dealing with today and provide helpful tips. For notes and more information on today's topic, visit our website, relationshiphelpers.net.
I have nothing to wear today.
I have nothing to wear today. Guys, have you ever heard that from your wives? I'm sure some of you have. So women, when you say that, what do you mean? I think every woman knows what she means, but what does all the other men, what do they think?
Well, I'd like to pose that question to you. What do you think it means, Vincent?
Well, for a man, when you say that, it means I don't have any clean clothes or I can't find anything to wear.
Kind of like that massive pile of underwear that piles up in a bachelor pad.
Right. Yeah, it's all dirty, or maybe it's I can't find it because I don't know where my wife put it, or something like that.
But ladies, we know that that's not really the case. When we say we don't have anything to wear today, it usually means something along the lines of, I don't feel like wearing anything that's in my closet. I'm not in the mood for what I've got in my closet. Nothing reflects my mood. I am bloated today. There can be multitudes of reasons for why you can't find one thing to wear today.
Yeah, so these simple words, I don't have anything to wear, mean two totally different meanings for men and for women. Women, it means I need new clothes. For men, it means I need my clothes washed.
Vincent, you still haven't gotten it. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need new clothes. I mean, yeah, what woman doesn't want new clothes? But it's more about a feeling thing. It's more about, I'm not feeling what I've got today. I can make it work, but I'm not feeling what I've got today.
So you're not feeling comfortable with your choices today.
That may be part of it. Yes.
So with men and women, there definitely can be a communication breakdown in some of the more, I guess, mundane kind of conversations or common things that's talked about in the household. So
that is one of the more mundane things. But that brings us to today's focus, which is conversation. We're going to take a look at 5 behaviors that break down a conversation, and hopefully our listeners can gain some insight into some of the ways that they maybe break down conversations with their families, coworkers, friends, etc. So, Vincent, you work a lot with couples. What do you see happening as you sit across from a couple in counseling?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that they talk way too fast to each other. If a couple comes in and they've had an argument or disagreement, then, in the midst of the session, I will work on just slowing them down. And many times it may be difficult to get them to slow down.
So it sounds like you're saying one of the ways to break down a conversation is talking too fast, or maybe even talking over someone. Right.
That can be a big problem, where they're talking, when someone's talking over someone and when they're talking too fast. Neither way is good, a good way to have communication.
I'll be careful not to talk over you today, or maybe not so careful. We'll see.
Thank you, and I'll try the same. So yes, I'll have a couple come in and they're just talking so fast. Both of them are talking so fast. Both of them are trying to get, all the words they can get in and get all the shots, or, feel like they're trying to win the conversation. And it can be quite actually comical as I try to slow them down. Now, it's not comical for them, but I'm sure looking from the outside as I'm trying to slow them down, and the process I use to try to slow them down can get kind of lighthearted towards the end. Because what I do is I have them work on reflective listening. This is where each person summarizes what they believe that the other person said to them, or what they thought they meant by what they said. And then I asked the person who had originally talked, did they give you a good summary? Did they really get the meaning? And so many times it takes 3 or 4 different passes or before they actually understand what the other person said. And I say after 3 or 4 times of saying the same thing over and over again, it gets just quite comical.
I would think that someone would talk too fast because they're so concerned with getting their point across that they're not considering what the other person has to say.
Yes, they want to get their point across, but their first mistake is that they assume they are understanding what the other person is saying, but they're really not. They hear the words and maybe even can repeat the words back, but they are not actually getting what the other person is trying to convey to them. For example, I think all couples can relate to this. The old, what do you want for supper? So, when a wife says this, what she really means is, do you want me to cook or not?
Maybe that's what she means. She could mean something else.
Well, she could, yes. They can be quite complicated. Yeah. But for the husband, many times for him, he's just wanting to know, do you want to eat chicken or do you want to eat beef tonight? Or maybe even pork.
Yeah, I think with women a lot of times, especially ones with children, it's just a matter of, I have not had a moment's peace all day, and really I'm just trying to passively aggressively ask, right. Could you just get something? Right,
so you wore out. Yeah. But the men are just wanting to know what is the meat that I'm going to eat. So even that, there can be this huge miscommunication. And as we began the show with just talking about, I have nothing to wear, that miscommunication that the other person assumes that they understand what the other person is saying, and they think they understand, but they really don't.
So what you're saying really is that it's not just a matter of repeating the words back to a person, but actually showing that person that you're trying to understand how they feel.
Yes, the other person wants to feel heard and understood, but one of the worst things to say is, I understand. This 2-word statement does not help the other person feel like they're understood. What they're really saying is, I assume I understand. It doesn't mean that they really, if they really understood the other person, then they would show that to them by giving them a good summary.
Okay, so it's kind of like in high school when you did an English paper and the teacher would say, show me, don't tell me.
Right, most definitely.
Okay, so it also sounds to me like what you're saying is a lot of people feel put off by the statement, I understand.
Not necessarily, but saying I understand, the person may actually understand correctly or they may not, but, by giving a short summary, the other person definitely shows the other person that they understand what they're interpreting or comprehending. So there's no leeway for misinterpretation, I guess. So, and this is looking into the Bible in James chapter 1, verse 19. James says for us to be slow to speak. So this is the brother of Jesus, and he wants us to slow our speech down. He wants us to weigh our words and not to be too quick in assuming negatively. And it can be difficult to slow ourselves down and too easy to jump to conclusions.
Well, in that verse, James says be quick to listen, then slow to speak.
Well, he does, but many times it's kind of difficult to work on the quick to listen part while people are talking. So, I think of in Seattle, there is a psychologist named John Gottman, and he has studied thousands of couples. They actually have a room that they've set up on the campus there, or his study lab, where they'll put monitors, on the husband and the wife's body, where they'll monitor their heartbeat, their heart rate, and they'll put them into this room, and he will have them interact with each other. And one of the, I guess, what does he call it? An indicator, I guess, to divorce is what we call what he calls a harsh startup. He says that is one of the first indicators that this relationship may be leading down the path of a divorce.
Well, that brings to mind the kind of comic strip joke of when a man comes home from work and his wife is already at home and she's already railing into him about how he wasn't there on time and really just lighting into him before they've even had a "hi honey, how are you?" Right.
It's that speaking too fast and jumping to all these conclusions. So, you've got this, what would you say, scientific method, physical data that John Gottman's got for the past 30, 40 years that says, hey, this is going to hurt or harm your relationship. And then we've got James, the brother of Jesus, and he's saying the same thing. He's saying, be slow to speak. So, it's just very, very important to do that. But yes, James does mention to be quick to listen first.
Okay, so this brings us to the second behavior that breaks down a conversation, not considering the other person's point of view.
Yeah, in a healthy conversation, each person takes in and thinks about what the other person has to say, their thoughts and feelings. The only way for a listener to show that they really understand the other person's point of view is if they try to describe it back to them. If somebody's just sitting there with a blank face, you really don't know if they're getting it or not. You have no idea. But, this sounds simple, giving kind of a summary, but often it is not. So, especially when it is an issue that is heated or that there's some tension, between the couple or between the two people that are talking. So what happens is the one person begins to explain their point of view. The listener thinks, hey, I've heard this before. We've talked about this 20, 30 different times. I know what they're thinking and feeling. So what do? They stop listening after the first sentence or so.
So everything sounds like the old Charlie Brown teacher, won't.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's no different. Nothing's really going through. So they don't take the time to fully hear the talker's point of view. They only understand the first bit of it and then tune it out. So what James says, to be quick to listen or to be an active listener, is really you have to allow the other person to fully express a thought. And so that means you've got to keep your mouth shut so that they can get it all out. And then second to being quick to listen is that you kind of give them feedback on what you feel like they just tried to tell you to make sure that you understood it correctly. So an active listener is active not only with their ears, but they're active with their mouth as well.
So it's empathetic feedback is what you're talking about. Empathetic feedback.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Laura, this reminds me of a YouTube video that you were telling me about Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, Simon Sinek was describing how Nelson Mandela interacted in a group conversation. He said that Mandela's father was a tribal leader and that Nelson Mandela learned from his father how to handle conversation in a group. His father would let everyone around him talk before he would say anything. He would wait until the very end after he felt that he had understood how everyone else felt. And then he would speak. And Nelson Mandela took this approach when he became a leader, and he made a point to have everyone feel heard. It's hard to feel heard when the person you're speaking to looks like they're not listening, which brings me to body language. Vincent, I'd like you to speak a little bit about our third behavior that breaks down a conversation, closed body language you see in people who have trouble communicating.
Wow, yes, this is very powerful. Body language is powerful. Experts say it's 65 to 75% of communication is body language. It's not necessarily the content, but it's how it is presented that is really important. That means that you might be saying all the right things with your content, but it really doesn't matter if your body language is bad. This really speaks about the third command that James gives in verse 1:19. He first says to be quick to listen, then he says to be slow to speak, and then lastly he says be slow to anger. Though we may not always admit that we are angry or we deny that we are put off by somebody, our body language often gives us away. So what happens is our body language tells the truth, although we may not. Our bodies are always giving us away. So in the situation where we already assume that we know what someone is saying or that we understand them, we may prematurely become angry or put off by them. So we may not directly tell them with our words, but our closed body language communicates that anger.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we really need to be slow in our whole thought process about a conversation, or our body may give off some negative body language.
Right. We have to be mindful of not only what we're saying, but how the other parts of ourselves are betraying how we feel. So, yes, this negative or closed body language can really kill a conversation or cause it to get out of control. Some people may react to the closed body language by shutting down, not opening up anymore. They may just kind of stonewall it, not give you any more. They become passive. Other people may react the opposite. They may, that closed body language may anger them, get them fired up, and they may become loud, antagonistic, and they become aggressive. But neither reaction is healthy.
So what are some common closed body languages that you see?
Well, some are crossed arms, looking away, tapping the foot, an intimidating stance, eye rolling.
You can't see that I'm eye rolling right now. Just kidding, listeners.
So the crossed arms, they communicate that, you're not receptive. You don't want to hear another point of view. You're just keeping everything in. You're not open to another person's thoughts or ideas. Yeah. So, but looking away, of course, shows that you're not interested in them. That you don't care what they have to say. You're not focused on them, but rather something else. Your attention is divided. It's not fully upon them. The intimidate or the tapping of the foot, it produces an atmosphere of hurriedness. You can kind of think, when you're around somebody who has tapping their feet, how do you feel? You feel kind of anxious, right? It puts this unnecessary anxiety in a conversation. You convey to them that they are wasting your time or that their thoughts are not worthy of your time. The intimidating stance. It's like standing up, leaning on the balls of your feet. That kind of shows that you are resistant to what they have to say, that you are ready to battle them with words. This produces, of course, a lot of tension even before the conversation begins. The eye rolling, like Laura was alluding to there, it's subtle, but maybe sometimes not so subtle.
It's a message in itself.
Yes, it's a way of showing contempt for someone. And actually, contempt is another one of those indicators of divorce that John Gottman had talks about in his series. This so before they begin to speak, the person's character, who they are as a person, is dismissed by that eye rolling. The person is not treated as God's creation, but as a mistake.
Wow. These negative closed body languages really do send the wrong message when you're trying to have a productive and healthy conversation. What if you cannot even see a person to be able to tell their body language, like you're on the phone or through texting?
Oh, well, or do you mean, Laura, when someone's maybe in the other room or the other side of the house?
Yes. We're guilty of this one. This is the fourth breakdown in conversation. I bet other listeners can relate. Trying to have a conversation from another room or across the house.
Wow, that's never happened in our household, has it, Laura?
Just happened about 20 minutes ago.
No,
yeah.
It wouldn't even happen today, would it? No. Yeah, so this is one that happens so often with couples, at least it does with us, that we have to continually be mindful of, is that, trying to carry on that conversation in different rooms. Well, this seems to happen when couples are not intentional enough about their conversations.
I think we can all relate to kind of having a hair trigger mouth.
Yeah, so it's really, they're too busy to sit down and talk, or when actually, that's the most efficient way to communicate and handle the situation. What's really going on is they're trying to get other stuff done.
Oh, like multitasking?
Yeah, I guess so. Or trying to. Or, in some cases, it could be they're just too lazy to walk into the other room. They'd rather just raise their voice a little bit to ask for that special favor from that spouse. So, even though they may be working on something else or do not take the time to stop and talk, it doesn't, that's not the healthy way to do it. It actually, in order to talk to the other person, they've got to raise that voice, which does take effort. And then when the person doesn't hear them, then they must raise it even louder. And then before the end of it, they end up yelling.
So it's a harsh startup again.
It's a harsh startup, and it's one of those other things you learn in counseling, an HEE, which is a high emotion environment, which is very unhealthy. Of course, yelling is a terrible way to begin or to be in the middle of or even the end of a conversation. It may help motivate warriors, in Braveheart or something like that, if you've got Mel Gibson there kind of getting you going on. But it's not going to help you bond in a relationship at home.
It's not going to pump up your husband if you need a favor.
Right. No. It's not going to help your wife to want to get that beverage for you anymore. And
later on, she might not feel very affectionate toward you either.
Right. It may actually push her away. So yelling... it may have its place in speech, but it's not, effective in conversation.
Yeah, it's a pretty aggressive thing. So, like you said, it does have its place in speech, but it is not effective in conversation.
So all of this, all of this kind of escalation of yelling and being unhealthy could have been avoided if the couple or one of the persons was actually intentional with their conversation, got up, went into the other room to be within a reasonable distance and talk to the other person.
And actually engage them face to face.
Yes, engage them face to face. And maybe even look at them in the eye. Wow. Eye to eye. Yeah. How about that? So walls and distance can get in between a conversation and disrupt it.
I see, which there's another thing that I think many of us are having to cope with now, which is our fifth behavior that breaks down a conversation, and that is device distraction. 20 years ago, people were getting on AOL to check their email, or they were waiting to hear, "You've got mail," which was, relatively rare. People other than computer nerds were beginning to surf the internet to a certain degree, but now surfing the net is like breathing, and people check their phone constantly to look at emails or their Facebook pages. Our society and lifestyle has drastically changed in just a few decades.
Yes, so when we're in a close proximity to each other so that we can actually have this conversation, proximity where we can see face to face, we used to only have to worry about maybe the TV or the radio, being a distraction. But now, cell phones are just one of the biggest problems, it seems. Our society seems to be constantly on smartphones. They seem to actually, take priority over people. So many times, a couple may be sitting down for dinner or on their date, and what happens? Their smartphones interrupt. They buzz or beep, And
they get notifications.
Yep, they get notifications from Facebook, Twitter, or whatever it may be. And, this disruption, what is it, or this interruption, what does it do? If somebody's telling a story, it will disrupt that story, stop it in between it, and, it will mess up a person's train of thought, and they may even, stop telling the story altogether. So that story's not shared between the two people. You don't have that emotional connection through that story.
So, Vincent, what I'm getting from what you're saying is conversation is really a lost art, because people are really developing such short attention spans because of our acceptance of the distractions that come from devices, or our acceptance of all of these different devices in our lives.
I believe so. And people are losing, or at least not honing their conversation skills, where they're interpreting what the other person is, or how they're reacting, or what they're really meaning by what they're saying, or even showing empathy to someone else. So, although it may seem small that phone interrupts with a beep or something like that, but really that relationship is really taking a hit. It's like chipping away at the relationship and really harming the relationship.
Well, this really makes a lot of sense. I know there's been a lot of attention and focus lately on narcissism. It's become a topic that's really blown up lately in the news, and it really makes sense when you think about it, because so much about what we learn from social media is that, it's very surfacey. And so if your attention span is so shortened by these things, you can't really get very deep.
Well, we're nearing the end of our podcast today. So to review, we described 5 behaviors that break down a conversation. Number 1, talking too fast or talking over someone. Number 2, not considering the other person's point of view. Number 3, using closed body language. Number 4, trying to carry on a conversation in different rooms. Number 5, device distraction by smartphones and technology. So thank you for listening, and we encourage you to work on these, or just consider these in your conversations. Goodbye. Our thought for the week. Rachel was a small first grader who walked a few blocks home from school each day. Her mother had taught her to come immediately home right after school. She had told her this many times and kind of drummed it into her so that she would be there. One day, Rachel was a little late. Her mother didn't panic, but after a while, she thought, well, where's she at? So she went outside and she went out to the curb and looked down, and there was no sign of Rachel. She began to pace up and down the driveway for about 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, she became kind of frantic. She's wondering, where is she at? Well, 20 minutes kind of went by, and she could see Rachel coming down the sidewalk. Well, as Rachel approached, her mother was visibly upset. She asked Rachel, where have you been? Rachel said, well, my friend Sally, she lost her doll. So her mother asked, oh, so you helped her look for her doll? And Sally said, no, Mother, no, Mommy. I didn't help her look for the doll. I helped her to cry. For Rachel, it was natural for her to empathize and listen. How well do you listen?
Thank you for joining us today on Relationship Helpers with Vincent and Laura Ketchie. It is our hope that you gain some valuable information from this program. For notes and more information on today's topic, visit our website, relationshiphelpers.net. If you would like for us to discuss a certain topic, please send us an email at vincent@ccofmooresville.com. Again, that is vincent@ccofmooresville.com.
Note that accuracy and authority in regards to the subject matter covered today is not a replacement for professional care. Neither the host, the clinicians, or the guests are rendering clinical or other professional advice. Seek professional help if you need it.